I'm not a very wise guy. I would like to think I'm a wise guy, but I make a lot of mistakes, and I fail a lot. Wisdom is not about preventing failure. Wisdom is not about being sinless. Being holy is about being sinless. Wisdom is just making wise choices. So when it comes to wisdom, anybody can be wise. The Dalai Lama is wise. Siddhartha, I think he's the Buddhist guy. He can be wise. Just take one. I'll tell you. Unless you want to compare that too. Sure, if you want. I'm just going to put this right. Alright, so let me start out with this. Knowledge versus wisdom. Who did I leave off at? I left off at... well, some people just came in. Claire. How is knowledge different from wisdom? Yes. I like the word application instead of uses. So, knowledge is just like fact, right? Every day we go about life, we think about facts. Facts are kind of how we form the basis of what we do. But wisdom is like applying the knowledge. So, if you know that fire burns, do you put your hand in the flame? No, right? It's just common wisdom. Don't put your hand in the flame. You are not Jesus. You are not Superman. You are you, and you will be burned. And that's just the application of wisdom. Is that elementary? Absolutely. Do people still burn their hands on hot things? Absolutely. I have 2 scars in the pretty much exact same spot around my arms because I decided to reach around the iron to smooth out my shirt to get the wrinkles out, and I burned myself twice. Do I ever make that mistake again? Have I ever made that mistake again? After the second time, no. But if there's a third time, I wouldn't be surprised. So, for the sake of speed, I might do that, and I might not learn my lesson. Is that wise? Absolutely not. So, but I know that the iron is hot and it's going to burn me. But some people are just dumb like that. Namely me in this example. Knowledge versus wisdom. So, when they are talking about wisdom literature, we're talking about how to live wisely, how to make wise choices, how to live probably the most holistic and peaceful life that you can. Arissa.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Let me ask you this. In the Proverbs, Proverbs is just a bunch of sayings for wise living. Can a non-believer read Proverbs and still, grow in wisdom?
I think so.
Okay. She thinks so. How many people agree with her? How many people don't agree with her? I agree with you. You can actually read the Bible and understand the Bible and still not be Christian and still be wise. Proverbs doesn't necessarily have to be read by a person who's saved. They can still lead a wise life. So wisdom, and there is a difference between being a Christian and not being a Christian, but I will get to that later. But in wisdom, anybody can read it and come to the same conclusion and apply those same things to a certain extent. Okay, so I will make that clear, to a certain extent. They can live a wise life. So it's not just like a certain aspect of life that wisdom really focuses. It's kind of all of the aspects of life that the wisdom books do focus. Some are more applicable for the Christian than others. Some are more applicable for non-believers than others. There is a big difference, but it's a small difference in the sense that there's like one thing that the non-Christian can't fully apply all the wisdom literature. So when we look at all the wisdom literature, all of it should be looked at and understood cumulatively. Like, to really lead your best life or a wise life, you kind of need to take everything into consideration. So it's nothing special to read. Like, there's no special way of reading wisdom literature. Wisdom literature, like in the Proverbs, you kind of have to sit down and sometimes you got to think about it. I would say Ecclesiastes is the same way. Job, you really have to sit down and think about it. It's like 43 chapters. And even for me, like, it's pretty heady and I don't have the patience for it, but it's hard. I mean, have I read through it? Yeah, I've read through it. It's just a little difficult. Some of it is written kind of musically. Some of it is just kind of written like a riddle. So sometimes you have to sit there and think about it. Proverbs, sometimes it's very straightforward. Sometimes it's not. And when it's not straightforward, it really forces you to sit down and think about it. But there's a reason why we meditate on Scripture. The more that you actually think about it, the more I think that you will be able to apply it to your life. So, I'm not necessarily going to go through how to read the wisdom literature. I am more so giving you an overview of wisdom literature. What are the nuances between a believer and a non-believer? And then we're actually, throughout this Sunday school lesson, we're going to be looking at the different books. Okay. So, if you don't have your Bible out, you definitely need your Bible out. Today is going to be heavy on reading. So we went through knowledge versus wisdom. The first aspect of knowledge or wisdom literature. Wisdom can be understood by non-Christians, but I will put an underline to a certain extent, which I will describe later. All right, let's just move on. Actually, let me look at my notes before I go. Let me just give you a brief definition. Definition of wisdom literature. Books that contain general truths. For living. All right. Let's see. Let's turn to Proverbs 1. Okay. As you guys are turning there, my personal opinion, I really like wisdom literature. The reason why I like wisdom literature is because I think that's where I've grown the most over my life. As a younger guy, I wasn't very wise. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of stupid stuff. Some of it was funny. I thought it was great, but it was stupid. To a certain extent, I expect younger people to do stupid things, and you learn from it. For the most part, I learned from it. I think that's wisdom. If you don't learn from it, you are biblically a fool. That's what a fool is. Okay. So for the majority of my life, I've lived my life as a fool. To give you an example, when I was younger, I was rebellious. I think everybody knew that. How was I rebellious? You can probably ask Aaron and Hanley for examples. Just don't give them all my examples, because that would be like talking trash. But you can give them all the examples if I'm there, because then I can laugh about it. But anyway, as a kid, I hated life. I hated people. You guys know that. Like, nothing cared to me. I think the biggest reason why I consider myself a fool when I was a child is probably similar to what I think happens in adolescence anyway. You think you know better sometimes. Or I think I know better sometimes too. But now as an adult, I don't see how youth can say that they know better than their parents when you haven't earned money for your own living. Like when you fight with your parents, or when I fought with my parents, I look back now and I'm like, dude, I was an idiot. I did nothing for my own living. I cheated my way through high school in some of my classes. Not all of my classes, but in some of my classes. I didn't do homework because I cheated. But I really didn't apply my life. Like, I was kind of just dead to everything. And so whenever I got in a fight with my parents, like, I thought that I knew better because it's what I wanted. Like, I thought I knew what was better for me because I am me. But now that I look back on it, if anything, I should have been whooped, big time, which my mom did when I was younger. But as I got older, she stopped that. So I do think that as a younger kid, I deserved it, and I was better for it. Now as an adult, and I think this for everybody, we understand why our parents did what they did to us. We understand the discipline. We understand when they loved us. We now understand that when we came home from school and our parents are angry, or they're tired, or they're happy, or they're sad, they're still taking care of us. In your future, your parents will still take care of you. In my future, my parents will still be taking care of me. But it didn't take me, or I didn't know that when I was younger. I knew that only when I was in their shoes. So, as a kid, I was an idiot. I was a fool. As an adult, now that I see, I don't have kids, so I don't really know that. I have a dog. But even having to take care of my nephew when they're in town. And so going to my parents' house after work and taking care of my nephew, even though I'm tired, like I did that, and I'm like, I understand why raising a child is difficult. I understand why raising youth would be difficult, because they start thinking that they know certain things. They start fighting. They're capable of fighting, even when they're the age of even when kids are age 3, they start saying no. It's like you are the prime example of depravity, and yet, even though like every ounce of you wants to like ignore this child, like you can't. One day you'll understand that. And I think when you look back at your parents, this knowledge that you know your parents are doing all these things for you, all of a sudden becomes wisdom. Because when you start having kids, you actually experience it. It applies to your life. So in that sense, I don't really worry about you guys being like jerk parents, because I think eventually you'll realize it. Now, when we get to the Bible and wisdom books, your living as a Christian, all of wisdom in the Bible as a Christian starts with this. Proverbs 1. Okay, so let me just bring my example of parenting. Non-believers can be great parents. You can be raised in a non-Christian home and be raised absolutely well. I will argue that there are parents, absolutely, that there are parents outside the church that aren't believers that are great parents. But this is where reading wisdom books separates non-Christians from Christians. And if you look at Proverbs 1, verse 7. Actually, let's go ahead and read 1 all the way to 7. I'm just going to read it. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning. Okay, increase in that knowledge. And the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. So it is advocating that you be trained in reading these things. 1, for the knowledge, and then 2, for the application of the wisdom. Then we get to verse 7. So in verse 2 to verse 6, he's basically saying like, you need this, right? We need to teach it to our kids. And then verse 7. This is where he really starts. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Wisdom and instruction. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The reason why this is so big, so important for you to understand, is as a Christian, we should fear God, but in order to be wise, you have to understand that all knowledge and therefore all wisdom begins with God. Okay. Why do I say that? Because even the wisdom literature recognizes God as the creator, and thus all things is defined by God. Our wise living, our holy living, is defined by God. So if you know that God exists and He is the standard of living because He is holy, then what is wisdom? What is a wise life? A wise life is a life that is in accordance with the Creator. right? That just makes sense. It's logical. If you take the Creator out of that, you can still lead what some people may consider a biblical life. But if you have no acknowledgement of God in your life, you've completely missed the point. You're just a good person. How many people in the church are good people but don't actually acknowledge God or try to pursue the knowledge of God and therefore try to pursue a wise life in the manner of God or in the manner of godliness, right? Are you guys tracking? That's why he's saying the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So, if you don't believe in God, and you don't believe that God is the creator, you can never really fully apply wisdom to your life. Because you've missed the standard. Okay. So, yes, wisdom knowledge are books, or wisdom literature are books that contain general truths for living. And that's true. But only to a certain extent when it comes to the Bible. Okay. So, it all starts with God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now, fools. Why do I harp on fools? Why do I keep saying, well, John when he's younger was a fool? Well, one, because I was a fool. But what makes him a fool when he's younger? Actually, what still makes him a fool, even though he's older? In the Bible, a wise person fears the Lord and walks in godly ways. Okay? It doesn't mean, as I said in the very beginning, it doesn't mean that you are sinless. It just means that you make wise choices. A fool is someone who knows what is right and wrong, but continues to do what is wrong. Okay? So I gave you the example of me reaching around the iron because I was, I don't want to spend all afternoon ironing my shirts. I hate it. Eventually you get used to it. So when I was rushing, I would reach around the iron. So I think the first time I burned my right arm, well, I was a fool. So I did it again because I was rushing. Or to give you another example, when I was in college and I was going to Mount Sac, I scheduled something the same time, or I scheduled an event or a meetup or something like an hour after my placement exam. Okay, to see where I was going to place for English and math. Well, English, I placed in English 67 or something like that, which is like 2 underneath 1A, like just regular English that you guys should all go to when you graduate from high school. Well, I placed 2 under that. And that was because I was rushing my exam because I realized I didn't schedule correctly because wherever I'm going to, I have to make time to get there. So I rushed my placement exam. Well, I did pretty well. And so the teacher, who I adored immensely, towards the end of the semester, she was like, "What are you doing next semester?" I was like, "Oh, I'm actually planning to attend your class again, English 68." And she's like, "What? Why? Like you're like way above this level. You shouldn't be here." And I'm like, "I don't know. It's just the logical choice from 67 to 68. So I'm going to take your class." So she told me, "Well, don't come to my class. Like, promise me you will take the placement exam and then go to 1A." So out of my respect for her, I said, "Okay." But out of my foolishness, what did I do? I scheduled something that same day, like an hour later. So what happened? I rushed. What happened then? I placed in English 68. I think only by default because I had already taken 67. So when she saw me the next following semester, she kind of got mad. But I think in her heart, she liked the fact that I was there. That was foolish, okay? Again, the reason why I give you these two examples is foolishness doesn't learn. Foolishness makes the same mistake. If you know something and you don't act on it, you are biblically a fool. To give you one example, if we go to Romans 1. All right. If we go to Romans 1, verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. When you suppress the truth, like you know something, but you're ignoring it, you're not trying to act on it. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God, nor give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay, so that's an example of foolishness. They're going and pointing back to the depravity of men, who everybody knows that they're like, they look at nature and nature screams that there is a creator. How does nature scream that there's a creator? Nature has patterns. If there are patterns, there must be a design. If there is a design, then there must be intellect. If there is an intellectual being that has placed designs and patterns in nature, then there must be a God. Okay. So, when people ignore that, it's called foolishness. All right. So, in wisdom, you have the contrast of wisdom, or wise people, and foolishness, or fools, yes.
So, like the passage says, for they knew God, they did not honor him as God, or give thanks to him. So technically, wouldn't that mean all I had to do was just come to church and say, oh yeah, I praise him? Or is the passage talking more like when they say they did not honor him or give thanks to him, or application based?
Wait, like as in they come to church and they say I honor you, and then that's salvation.
For example, no, like wisdom. I don't know. Never mind.
Okay. I don't know either. All right, so going back to wisdom books, let me run through this. So Proverbs, I think I've already explained. Okay. Proverbs is just sayings. That one's a little bit more straightforward. I guess we can go to Proverbs 20. Okay, go to Proverbs 20. I'm going to give you one example. I think many of you guys know this. If you were in Bible trip, they probably drilled this into your head. Proverbs 20, verse 1. Wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Okay? Wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. I will tell you that alcohol does not result in a wise life. All the issues that I see in downtown LA generally revolve around alcohol. If they're drunk, they become belligerent. If they're drunk, they become violent. If they're drunk, they start throwing up all over the place. It's, I don't know. I've seen a lot of bad things result from alcohol. I have also experienced a lot of bad things from alcohol. So when you get into college, don't drink. All right, Proverbs 6. This is probably going to be the last one in Proverbs. We'll go to verse 6. Proverbs 6, verse 6. I hate laziness, but I can be lazy to a certain extent. This is what I always think about when I think about my own laziness. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber and want like an unarmed man. Basically, I would say the gist of it is laziness. Okay, sluggard is not wise. Okay, yeah, a little bit of rest is good. A little rest is fine. There's no problem with that. So why does it say that? The reason why the author puts that in there is to make you think about it. I don't think he's actually saying don't rest. But I think he's saying be careful how long you rest for. Because he knows that humanity is like, you know what? And this is what I told myself yesterday. Just one more episode. And I'm watching, and like next thing I know, my normal sleep time is like 9 o'clock. It's already 10 o'clock and I'm like tired. So I'm a little bit tired today. But like, just be careful. There's a balance to it. All right, Proverbs. So that's basically it. Proverbs, I think, is the easiest one to go through. Let's go ahead and we'll go to Job. All right. How many of you guys are familiar with Job? Book of Job. How many of you guys have actually read all of Job? Okay. Job is difficult to read. But I think Job is one of the first wisdom books that impacted my life. As you read Job, okay, I'm just going to give a really quick overview. Job, in the very beginning, you actually see Job. He's flourishing. The guy's got literally the best life anybody could have. Okay, kids, servants, slaves, slaves or whatever. Same stuff. Kind of, not really. But he's got it all. Satan goes to God and says, well, of course this guy's going to be worshiping you. Of course he's going to be godly. He's got nothing to go against him. Right? And he's got everything to thank you for. So of course he's going to be following in your footsteps. So God's like, okay, why don't you test him? So Satan eventually takes everything the guy has. Except his life. So Satan took his family. Satan took his wealth. Satan took his health, except for his life. Meaning, he had boils and all these other things. It was just terrible. Okay, you can basically say it's the bottom of the bottom of the barrel. Then 3 friends come in the picture. 3 friends who are basically going to Job and saying, look, you must have done something to anger God. You must have sinned against God. Maybe you did this. Maybe you did that. Each friend has a different aspect of what they argue. But ultimately, they're pointing at Job as the sinner. Okay. But Job is like, I didn't do those things. I don't know what was wrong. And sometimes, we might sin. We might not know, what we did wrong. But aside from that, turn to Job 38. There's actually a fourth character, and it's like this young kid who is also kind of not right, but he is kind of right. He rebukes Job in questioning God's justice. So Job 38. And I'm just going to, again, we're doing a brief overview, and then I'm going to tell you like what I get from it. So after tons of chapters and tons of arguments and rebukes, Job is like, okay, I must have done something. I don't know what it is. Verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words and without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Now here, I love this. Like I recently was at work. I recently got really mad. I haven't been this mad in years, and my friend, who's my subordinate, my direct subordinate, called me later that day and said, like, you handled yourself really well. Like, I haven't seen you that mad in years. And I was like, oh, thanks. Because, like when I get mad, I try to, calm down. But I start, like one of the things that I did was I started questioning people and what they were doing. Like I had a supervisor who wasn't filling something out properly, which was for accountability purposes. And I said, why do you think we have accountability purposes? And I threw papers down on the desk. I said, look at everything. And I'm questioning him, but I'm questioning him in the sense that I already know the answer, and I know that he knows the answer, but I'm questioning him rhetorically, almost. I guess that's a way. So that's what God is doing here. I will question you, and you tell me. You tell me the answers to these questions. So then he goes to verse 4. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? I am the creator. Why are you questioning me? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Okay, so rhetorical, right? Like just like it's scathing. It's hilarious. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Where were you, Job? Where were you? It's almost like he's questioning Job's manhood when he says, dress for action like a man. He's not really questioning, but he's like, get ready, Job. I'm going to start questioning you, and I want you to answer the God of all creation. Like, it's like, wow. Gee, God, I really don't want to battle you. But this is like God's time to actually answer Job. God did not, let me make this very clear. In Job, God never answers Job why Job was basically made destitute. God never answers that. God just basically tells Job, I'm the creator. Who are you to question me and what I'm doing? God never tells Job about the conversation that he had with Satan. So after all of this, Job is like, I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have said a thing. And so in our lives, I think a lot of times we question God. We know God is good. We know and understand that God exists, that he is a standard of everything. And we know that God is gracious to us. But in your future, especially with college, you may not get into the college that you want. And You might not get into any of the colleges that you want. Who are you going to be mad at? Some people will question God, and when I was a kid, I did that too because I was stupid. And then, oddly, that same night, like a really massive earthquake hit, scared the crap out of me. I literally was like praying, like, God forgive me. That was the dumbest thing I could ever do. I thought it was because of me for a long time. It's not because of me. Who am I to cause an earthquake? Who am I to question God? Who am I to tell God what is right and wrong? I just need to trust God. Why? Because he's the creator. Okay. So that's kind of what Job is going through. And so in this book, we don't know why God does what he does. We just know that God is good and God is a creator. And that we have to trust God. Job trusts God. God restores Job and more. Okay. So that's the book of Job. It's super encouraging. But it's also encouraging for the fact that you see all of these other people try to tell Job why he did what was wrong, when really Job should have said, I just trust God. Because he's the creator. So be careful about your counsel too. All right. So that's Job. Job is, I'm going to narrow it down to this. Job is about suffering. Let's see what suffering and sovereignty of God. And it's a discussion format. So it is interesting. It's pretty nerdy. I like it. It's kind of hard to understand to a certain extent. It really takes effort. Ecclesiastes. And I skipped Job. I didn't put I didn't put Proverbs up on the board. Proverbs. Like, I essentially describe it. Instead of books, it's more of like sayings that contain general truths for living, to a certain extent. And I'm always going to say a certain extent because we have God. All right, Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is definitely one of my favorite books. I love Ecclesiastes. I probably read it I always go back to once maybe every other year. Go ahead and go to Ecclesiastes 1. Make sure. All right. So I'm going to give some examples, but then I'm going to summarize it for you on the board. And I really can't give you everything that the book talks about, or any of these books talk about. It's a little bit difficult to capture all of wisdom in just 1 hour. But Ecclesiastes, one of my favorite books. Why? Because some people consider Ecclesiastes bipolar, right? You have really happy, and then really sad, or sad, destitute. But Ecclesiastes, it's got all these highs and lows. But when you read it and you read it enough and understand enough to actually get your emotions involved into the reading, I think you will understand it that much more. All right, so a couple things about Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes 1, verse 1, it says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. One quick note, I don't think Solomon actually wrote Ecclesiastes. Why? I don't want to get too nerdy on you. I'm just going to say this. Some of the writing or the words in the book in the original language is characteristic of a later time. But it doesn't ignore the fact that whoever is writing it is taking on the persona of Solomon. Why is Solomon so important? One, he wrote Proverbs. Two, in the Old Testament, Solomon was gifted by God wisdom. Solomon was known around the world to be the wisest man, even so wise that the Queen of Egypt goes to him for counsel. So Solomon is the wisest man. So of course it makes sense to use Solomon as the persona. Because how can you argue for wisdom if you are not the expert, right? So Ecclesiastes, persona of Solomon, not necessarily written by Solomon. Could be debated, whatever. Okay, let's move on. Verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So one of the main themes is vanity. Let's see, who do I want to pick on? Marianne. Give me one example of the biggest... When I say vanity, what do you think about? Just whatever comes to your head. Except for mirror. Just like, don't pick on me. Picking on me, fool. Should I move on? Okay, meaningless. Well, okay, like, when I say vanity, though, like, what do you think about in life in general? No? Okay. What do you think about when I say vanity or meaningless? In your life?
The mirror.
Mirror on the wall.
All right. What is vanity in your life today, or in the world? Just like when you think of vanity, I think of this.
I think of mirror. I'll be completely honest. I literally think of mirror.
Why do I even talk? I should have never said mirror. All right. When I think of vanity, I think of social media. The reason being is because as I'm scrolling, like I love looking at Instagram about nerds, like Star Wars or Harry Potter. I like looking at food. I like looking at baseball, at basketball. I love looking at maybe like gym stuff, like going to the gym, working out, flexibility, whatever. Especially dogs and animals. I love it. I love it. But it really angers me as I'm scrolling and there's like this hot person, obviously me being a male, it would be female. And I'm like, why did this show up on my feed? Because I'm clearly looking at it. And like, I'm like, why is it showing up on my feed? And somebody decides to put hashtag puppy. I'm like, you must be kidding me. But I'm clearly looking at it. Okay, so what I'm saying is this. When I scroll through social media, because I do use social media, and you've got all these girls or guys or whatever, like doing something for the likes, I think that is depravity. I think that's super vain. I think it's especially vain when they use filters to make them look better. Because now you're just straight lying to me. All right? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, does vanity stop there? Absolutely not. Vanity, in the book of Ecclesiastes, when he says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, he's saying everything under the sun is vanity. Everything under the sun, as Marianne read it, is meaningless. So what's the point to life? I try to save money to make my payments on the house. I try to save money to make payments on my car. I don't know if I'll ever have a kid, so do I try to save money? Nah. But if I ever have a kid, then I might try to save some money for him or her. But what if I die tomorrow? Which is super probable. Like, I mean, I don't see why not I wouldn't die tomorrow. Probably cheated life thousands of times already. Or death. If I die tonight, who enjoys my money?
The government.
The government enjoys my money. Unless I've written a will, which I haven't written a will. Actually, my parents will get some money. Okay. Whatever you're striving for, if you're trying to go to like a really good college and you've done all the community service, you've done all the studying, you dedicate your life to studying to the point where you really literally have no friends, which I think is impossible. Your parents are your friends, remember that. And you die tomorrow. What's the point? In the book of Ecclesiastes, everything is vanity because everything is temporary. Vanity comes from the root word, which also means vapor. Vapor, why is vapor such a very good example? Is because a vapor is that. It's just, it goes in the air and it vanishes. That's life. That's the likes that you give on social media. That's, even though you might live to be 100 years, everything that you have, everything that you are, is vanity. It's a vapor in the wind. It's not just a vapor. Think about it. It's a vapor in the wind. Like, you're going to get, like, dried out quicker, right? So, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Under the sun, your work is vanity. And so, the book, Solomon is trying to understand what is the meaning of life. How do I live a wise life? If I'm trying to harvest, when do I harvest? Like, there's a time for everything, right? And there's I think it's Ecclesiastes 3 where he goes, there's a time for this, a time for that, a time for this, a time for that. You don't know the time, though. You don't know the time when you need to harvest. You know the season. You might see clouds coming in. You don't necessarily know if it's going to rain. It's like getting a car wash, and then all of a sudden, a couple days later, it rains. That's vanity of vanities. All the work that you just did, nothing. And it happens just like that. You don't know timing, but you know that you should. So timing's difficult. Ecclesiastes, one of it is, some of the things is, vanity is your major theme, right? Everything's vanity. The next thing would be balance. Be wise. But he also says don't be too wise. Because even the pursuit of vanity or the pursuit of wisdom is vain. Now, how can you say that? God said you can have anything in the world. You said vanity, or you said wisdom. So, how can you say that wisdom is also vanity? Because wisdom, or the pursuit of it, is still vanity. The equalizer of all things is death. You can be the wisest person, you will still face death. You can be the smartest person, you will still face death. You can be the healthiest person, you will still face death. That is why everything is vanity. So he argues for balance. Save up your money for a good future, but don't save it all to where you're not happy. Enjoy your work, use your money, and be happy. Because that's the pleasures in life that aren't sinful, God has given you to enjoy. Okay, let me repeat that. The pleasures in this world that are not sinful, God has given you to enjoy. So, if you make a lot of money, enjoy it. I don't care if you get 5 Maseratis or whatever, but give to God what is God's. If you give to God what is God's, what is God. Like, if you give to God what belongs to him, and he lets you enjoy being a billionaire, enjoy it. Balance. Don't be selfish with money, though. All right, next thing, Ecclesiastes. Go to Ecclesiastes 12. This is where everything turns for the Christian. In Ecclesiastes 12, verse 1 through 8, he goes through how you get old. You will get old. I will get old. We were just talking about my health and back pain. 10 years ago, I didn't have any pain. I could sprain my ankle. I could get jacked up. Like, I would heal real quick. Anybody who tried to fight me, I know that I would destroy them because that was just my ego. Now I'm just like, I can't jump off ledges above 4 feet because I'm afraid my knees might snap. Getting old sucks. But that's what happens to all of us. So he goes through all of that. Basically to say, hey, you're going to die. Okay, that's really what it is. At the very end of Ecclesiastes, verse 11, verse 13, the end of the matter. All has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. The end of the matter has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. The writer of Ecclesiastes brings you back to fearing God. And that's going to be your number one theme in all of wisdom, is to fear God, because fearing God is the beginning of wisdom. All right? Now, that's Ecclesiastes. The last one that I have. So vanity, balance, pleasure. I would say pleasure, but not sin. Okay, not sin. And then, of course, everything encompasses fear of God. Before I move on to Song of Songs, I will say that fear of God is not being terrified of God. Fear of God means that you revere God. You revere God so much that it's hard to be in God's presence. You know he will die. Like, when I think fear of God, I think of people trembling before God because they know of his greatness. It's a reverence, a deep reverence for God. Now, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Now we come to Song of Songs. Song of Songs it's about love. You guys know that, I think. It's about an intimate love. So if I were to write this down, Song of Songs is just about love. The book does not acknowledge God. Like, there's no mention of God in the book. But I think the reason why it's in the Bible is because it shows you sacrificial love. So I would say maybe the love of God in our relationship. Now, when I say relationship, this is more for marriage. Okay, it's not just an erotic love. It's not just it's not a brotherly love. I think this is a love specific towards marriage. There are three characters. You have the woman, the Shulamite woman. The Shulamite woman is, they think it's a field worker. Why? Because she got dark skin. Okay. It shows that she's usually out in the field working, but then you have this guy, they chase each other, they chase after each other. There are intimate parts. They describe their bodies as a way of adoring them, not just our immature laughter that most kids do when they're like in 5th grade, which I've done when I was in 5th grade, so whatever. Three characters: woman, man, and the town. The town, or the town's people, they affirm the relationship. Like they rejoice that these two people are together. I think that's important when you get married, is that you are affirmed, or people affirm that marriage. And yet I understand that might be some of you who will not be affirmed by the people that you want to affirm the marriage. But I do think that you have to think about it biblically. Let's just say if I met a girl or a woman, whatever, woman whose parents weren't Christian and they didn't value me. They didn't want the marriage to happen. But I and the woman are Christians and we value the relationship, but we know it's because Jesus is in the middle. And the church and my friends and people at church, like they think it's a good match. I think that's going to be a good match. Would I still go through with it? Yeah, but I would try to win their parents over. But of course, also evangelize their parents. What you do see in Song of Songs, mostly though, is that the woman and the man are pursuing each other before marriage, in marriage, and beyond marriage. That the affirmations of either how they look and who they are do not stop. From my understanding, after marriage, they stop pursuing each other romantically to a certain extent. They don't comment each other. They just live with each other. Because all of a sudden they see the bads of each other once they get together. And they're like, who is this that I've married? Like, it's two different people. I don't know. But what I do see, what I can tell you as a single man who has read Song of Songs, the woman and the man, not just the woman, but and the man pursue each other equally, not just romantically, but personally. Before marriage, in marriage, and after marriage. And I think that's important for you all to understand. Not only that, they actually give up each other in this, or they're constantly not give up, but they're constantly pursuing each other. So, love of God in relationship, I would also equate this to the pursuit. The pursuit. So I've gone way beyond my time. Song of Songs, if you ever read it, it's very hard. It's a very difficult read. But I do think it is good for you to understand in terms of marriage. Obviously, I'm not married, so I can never speak to that. But I can say what I see in Song of Songs is that there is this unending pursuit. That reminds me of the love that God has for me. He is always pursuing me, even when I don't pursue him. So with that said, let me go and close in prayer. Father, we just thank you for this time, even though I went a little bit longer, actually a lot longer. I do pray that we would we would strive to live a wise life. That we would strive to live a life that, one, understands that you are the creator, that you are the savior, and only through you can we have an accurate understanding and perception of the world. And I pray that this understanding would just not just be a knowledge, but it would be wisdom. It would inform all of our choices, whether it be ice cream or whether it's college or marriage. God, I pray that we would always have you on our minds, especially in all of our decisions. In Jesus' name, amen.